All right, guys. Gonna see if I can film a little bit tonight. But I do have bourbon. Let's see if we can focus here. There we go. Is that better? I'm just gonna do what I can. This is a 9x12 Strathmore Series 5 illustration board. I printed it out on my Epson P400, and then I've got some nice Chris Evans reference to go by. So this is, it's basically just a copy of this photo, but it's a commission, so a long overdue one, as the case may be. I think what I'm going to do is just fold this over so that I can get closer to the face. Actually, you know what? I'm too scared to do the face right now. I just need to make some other progress first. So like I said, this was done in Photoshop and then printed out. So it'd just be a little bit faster. All right, and this is a cap from the Winter Soldier, so it's in its stealth mode. All right, I'm going to use my palette that I was doing earlier this week. It's kind of a mess right now, so I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm probably not going to mix that many opaque colors. Maybe to keep things easy, I'll just stick with the blue suit. I'm going to use a lot of Payne's gray, kind of going maybe a little bit of gray. This is the one that I was painting with that palette. So that's done. This is a Thanos. This was watercolor. And then I finally got around to organizing my paints, so things got a little crazy last time. All right, so let me set this Derek Chris Evans together. It's Payne's gray, so you guys can see. I think Payne's gray is going to be my darkest dark. Yeah, close enough. If I want to go darker, I can, but if I want to just leave it alone, Payne's gray is dark enough, and it leaves kind of, I don't know, it's not pure black. If you do pure black, it sometimes kind of kills the sense of space, if that makes any sense. Which it should if you've ever painted before. And if you've never painted before, then I don't know what to tell you. I don't know what you're doing watching this. I think I'm going to attack this with two brushes at the same time. This is a cat's tongue, but I'm using it like a filbert because it's all attacking in a very precise manner, like all the different shapes that I need. Go to the palette so I can dip. And I'll start with a nice big easy shadow. So we can just make some progress real fast. And I can start feeling good about myself again. Hope everyone's doing okay with the world and its current lockdown. we're all good here. Just kind of keeping things going. Everybody's healthy. Everybody's well fed. I'm starting to get too well fed. Kids are asleep. But I'm still trying to figure out when this whole thing is gonna end. My 4 daughter asked me today. I just kind of gauge her overall mood. And she said, "Well, what if it doesn't go back to normal, Dad?" And I was like, "Well, it might be a new kind of normal. You know, things aren't gonna just snap back the way I think a lot of people had hoped. It might be a long, drawn-out process, but we'll get back to some semblance of normalcy." One thing that I think will be good is that people's general habits of hygiene, I think, will be improved because for once everybody kind of had to do the same thing. And the danger won't be gone when all of these lockdowns are lifted. So everyone's going to have to remain vigilant. I'd rather that weren't the case, but it just might be the way it has to be. Yeah, Payne's gray is really nice. It's like almost black, but it if you water it down, you get a really nice blue. I'll try and do a little bit more rendering because I know if I just go through the whole thing and just like paint all of the darkest darks, it makes sense from an efficiency standpoint, but it might be kind of boring to watch. You know, honestly, during this part of the process, I'm usually listening to an audiobook. Anytime when I have to do like a whole lot of rendering, you know, you can really tell that your brain is somewhat compartmentalized as far as the visual portion versus the language or logic. I can listen to an audiobook, and sometimes, you know, pretty information dense audiobooks, as long as I'm at the point in a project where all I'm doing is just something look quote unquote real, you know, rendering shadows, or but if I'm trying to do something like you know, I can't run dialogue in my head, I can't do sketches, you know, like compositional sketches, that kind of stuff. Anything where I have to like use logic and really think things through. I can't do it. I have to have either silence or music and usually music without too many lyrics. But I like it because they're kind of really different. You know, it's the same job, but it's so different. You know, one is just like you kind of get paid to sit there and listen to books you already wanted to listen to, which is nice. When I was penciling this out, I was listening to the latest Malcolm Gladwell book, Talking to Strangers. Maybe I'll try and get one of these shadows in there. One of the form shadows. I mean, this is almost complete darkness here, so. One of the nice things with a flat brush, you can kind of hold it at an angle and get a hard edge on one side and a softer edge on the other side. And that's even more true with this guy. You know, I talk about it a lot, but at this stage of the painting, this is like kind of almost an underpainting. And really, you're just using the gouache like watercolor. So this is essentially a stain of the paper. So what that means is if you paint over it, you know, the gouache it's not thick enough. It's become part of the paper, so it won't really lift off. I mean, you can always rub a little bit away if that's what you want, but for the most part, it has become a part of the paper. And so, you know, that's the Alex Ross technique, where you do a really tight and detailed underpainting in usually a very dark pigment. Not always, but and then once that's done, then you go back over it with transparent color. And you know, it's just a real effective and efficient way of getting, you know, that realistic look. You know, that's pretty much still how I start everything. It's not quite how I finish, but just because I tend to like having some opaque passes at some point. All right. So you can kind of see the form coming together. You know, that one shadow. You know, it's funny, like now that I look at it, this is an instance of where I'll probably want to deviate from the reference a little bit. Like that shadow, I know I've accentuated it here, but I'm going to tone it down even more than I have here. Because it's not really, it's letting you know that it's a material, you know, it's cloth, but as far as it being Captain America's chest, it's not the world's greatest shadow. I'll just tone it down by making it a lot darker. And to give you a heads up as to like where this will go, just this section, I'll add another blue on top of this transparently. And that blue will probably be some kind of phthalo, you know, his suit, the stealth suit is navy, but navy, you know, it's not really a purple blue. It's closer to cyan, but you know, it's not very saturated at all. It's very dull. But I've kind of always painted cap like that ever since ever since the first game. I like, you know, I pretend like it's the flag, and you know, classically he's a very bright, you know, phthalo blue, you know, almost like a sky blue in some cases, and I never really liked that very much. Especially like I like it in some drawings, but for painted stuff, like I like the dark navy blue. Just you know, personal preference. So I was really happy when Winter Soldier came out, and they took him away from the like the pale blue. Obviously, I've thought about this quite a bit because it's my job. And here I've lost the lines underneath, but the shapes are simple enough where it doesn't really matter. Where it matters more is going to be up in the face. You know, that's where I'm going to spend like the majority of the time. So maybe I'll do another session. Kind of depends how I'm feeling. My palette's such a mess right now that I don't feel like trying to mix any colors. It would just be a disaster, I think. Usually the way this palette works, you know, it's a paper towel and then parchment paper on top of that, and it keeps paint wet for weeks. But in this case, the way that our household has been, so if I ignore the palette, it'll dry out, and then it never quite goes back to the way it originally was, which is flat. So I'll just have to redo it. But parchment paper is pretty cheap, thankfully, so no big deal. Oh, and I realized I didn't draw out the little panel lines on his star. I meant to do that, but I got anxious. Oh well. I think I can handle it. I'll just have to get out my trusty pencil and eyeball it. This whole section is like almost completely black. So take some liberties with it. You know, I've painted this suit a number of times now, and it's just so funny. Like it reads pretty simply on screen, and then when you try and paint it, oh my god, it's like so many seams on it. But you know, I still think it's a good costume for screen, but it'd be a really bad costume for a comic. Just too many details to get wrong. Use this to kind of blend everything together. You know, as long as it's still wet, you can still kind of move it around. But then once it dries, that's, you know, mostly a permanent stain. It becomes part of the board. So, you know, I've mentioned it before. If there's a section that needs to have fairly soft gradations, your best bet is to wet the whole thing first and then work wet into wet. You know, it doesn't have to be completely saturated, it just has to be somewhat damp. And then I'll just take the edge off those brush strokes and also give you a little bit more working time. You know, if you put down a stroke and it's not quite right, you'll be okay. You can still kind of adjust it, push and pull the pigment. So I'll give you an idea of like how I would end up coloring this. So I have, you know, a pretty good idea the way the shadows are going to be right here. So I would take one of this. This is a natural fiber brush, as opposed to this one. This is natural fiber, but it's a little bit stiffer. Actually, no, this is natural fiber plus synthetic, but it's stiffer. And then this one's all natural fiber, which is really nice for transparent media, watercolor. But what I'm doing is adding a little, I think, you guys see that? You know, it's a pretty strong pigment, so I'm going to water it down quite a bit. I think Holbein calls it navy blue, but it does not look navy blue to me. But I use it because it's nice and dark and has a powerful tinting strength. So, you know, it's probably tough. I don't know if this is going to read through the video, but the change is pretty subtle. It just makes the blue a little bit more saturated. And really, like, the best part about it is that it differentiates the blue that's in light versus the blue that's in shadow. And that change is what really makes a painting, especially in real life, just makes it more engaging. And the difference is so subtle, but if you're looking at an original painting, it makes all the difference. You know, it's the reason why a lot of times if you see something that's computer colored, you know, the rendering's all there, the light and the dark, but there's no shift in hue, in actual color between the light and the dark. And so that's what kind of gives you that computer generated feeling of lifelessness. And actually one of the things you can do if you're working digitally in Photoshop is you can do a gradient map. So let's say you have something that's fully rendered, but it's only done in one color. You can put an adjustment layer on top of that. And the adjustment layer is for a gradient map. What it does is it maps one color to the light and one color to the dark. And then it handles the transition itself. And man, it makes such a difference. And you can take it further. You could do an intermediary step. So you could go from yellow to orange to like a deep red, and then to some kind of cool color, whether purple, blue, whatever. I mean, you can actually do some pretty psychedelic stuff as well. In fact, I used that technique once for Doctor Strange. I painted Doctor Strange one way, and then they wanted a second variant version, and so I just did a gradient map of it and just played around with the colors until it looked psychedelic. You know, I don't know how they actually did those like psychedelic colors back in the 60s, you know, barring any drug use, but I'm sure you know it's some process that mirrors it in some way. You know, because the concept is the same. You're taking an image and you're just shifting everything over from a hue perspective. All right, so I'm going to go and define some of these panel seams before I lose them. That happens a lot with the Marvel, the MCU costumes. You know, there's certain seams that I know are going to shadow and it doesn't matter, but if it's something that's in the light, I want it to, you know, it doesn't have to pop. I just need to remember where it is so that I don't have to go and redraw everything. So I'll just kind of accentuate that. You know, I've got my reference right next to me, so that'll guide me, but I just don't want to have to redo any work that I've already done. That's a big thing with these seams. You know, I don't even know what this shape is. I guess it looks like it comes over from the back and it's the way that like the neck secures itself, but you know, I don't know of any actual jackets that work that way. But when you put it on Captain America, it looks just fine. But you're not going to catch me dressing like that. All right, I need a sip of bourbon. You guys have any questions while I'm drinking? Check Twitter real quick, make sure my post went through. Nope. I use ifttt.com to make sure things from my Instagram go to my Twitter. So I'm going to check that now. There we go. Technology. One more sip. Good stuff. All right, so let's get the panels done. At least for this one. Like I said, my palette is a mess, but because I'm just using Payne's Gray here, it doesn't matter that much. This right here is what I like starting out transparently, because there's lots of textural things that happen that like I don't really have any control over, but they really just they sell the surface in ways that I won't be able to do with opaque paint. Like, you know, obviously you could do it. It would just take forever, and it'll look way better if it just looks, you know, kind of like an accident. I do want to keep this area a little bit lighter because I want to accentuate. I don't know if you guys can see this. Let's see. I want to accentuate this cast shadow here. Yeah, it's tough to see. So, you know, there are always moments in your reference where you'll see something that you want to kind of hold on to, accentuate, and other things that you want to downplay. Those decisions are easy when it comes to, you know, the costume. With the face, it's going to be a lot tougher. So, probably not going to get much of that done tonight. Still trying to go to bed at midnight. mainly so I'm not a wreck when my children get. Thankfully, my wife gets up first and she tackles the children. And then I usually, during this whole lockdown, I've been getting up at around, I try to get up before 8. But sometimes, I don't get to bed until like 1 or 2. My wife has the ability to fall asleep at a moment's notice and also wake up at a moment's notice. And I take a really long time to cycle between both. I'm naturally a night person, but I try and stick to a reasonable schedule so that I'm not a zombie. What I noticed doing the shoulder, the lines actually don't line up. They kind of they alternate. So it's a weird kind of accordion feel. I never noticed that until I started painting it. Now, here's an example of where I'm going to wet it first. And it doesn't have to be pure water. In fact, sometimes it's good to have a little bit of pigment in there so that you know what you've covered. But in this case, it's a nice, round shoulder, and so you want that gradient to be, without too many random shadows in there. So once that's all laid out, leaving a little bit of rim light. You kind of have a stylistic choice to make when it comes to the rim lighting. Since this is a commission that's mostly going to be, white background, I still am going to have a white highlight, backlighting around the edges. So I could just leave that line there, and that might be what I do. But that's part of the reason I put a background in there, so that I can push the background back while giving the white highlight something to play against. And it'll also give me the opportunity to put in a glow if I want to. That's kind of the nice thing about vignettes is you can kind of choose what your background is. What I mean is, like, you can do it according to what you need versus the interior logic of what you're painting. Because sometimes you'll, quote unquote, paint yourself into a corner where you've chosen a certain angle, and because of that decision early on, you have to follow through, and you have to just paint whatever is behind the subject. And sometimes it's really difficult because, there might be weird tangents, there might be weird colors, something that you wouldn't have done had you known or thought about it beforehand. That of course is why you do preliminary work to kind of massage those things out before you really get into the thick of painting, but you can't always predict it. And I just realized, here's another point. I meant to do that seal in Photoshop before I printed it out. Now I'm going to have to freehand that. Yeah, the rim lighting is how you can usually tell how Photoshop stuff is. Because usually, I've seen a lot of the studio photography that these things come from, and they're nice photos. But when you start packing them all together in the same composition, it just kind of gets funny as to the way the light does or doesn't interact with the subject matter. Whenever I'm doing these Marvel posters for like the casting crew, I always get Bucky wrong, Sebastian Stan. They always have some issue with the way I paint him, and they're right. Like, it's not that I don't think it's anything about his face. It's usually that there is a particular photo that I want to use because I just think it's a good photo, but it's not the best for, a likeness. And so you don't just rely on one photo, but it's still, you pick one as like your main influence. And if it's a bad one, man, it can really ruin your day. And for some reason, I never like the studio photography that they give me. It's, I don't know what it is. I would imagine a lot of it is up to the photographer. I mean, I've never been on one of those shoots, so I don't know how it goes. What I do know is that they shoot a lot, and what I'm seeing is usually just a really small portion of everything that they've done. On a few occasions, I have seen what I think would be the entire run, the entire shoot with that actor in full gear and everything, and it's just mind-boggling. Like, I don't know how long these things take, but there's no way you could take that many photos of someone in less than like 2-3 hours. It wouldn't surprise me if it was even longer than that. The one in particular I'm thinking of is Loki, and I don't know how they choose like what they give me. I think it might just be up to one guy, and they just had so many photos of him, just every possible angle, every possible lighting situation, and the vast majority of it is, I wouldn't say it's unusable. It was useful to me in a lot of cases, but from a marketing standpoint, you could never use it as anything official. But I'm sure that's just how a lot of things are. Most of the sketches I do, I never make it to the final version. But photography is just funny like that because it always looks pretty good because it's a photograph. But sometimes you just get lucky. And some will be real, just perfect. The thing that I don't really try to do anymore is like change expressions. I tried that on a few occasions, and man, it never goes well. Sorry guys, you tuned in for like what is probably the most boring subject matter in terms of painting. I'm just painting folds. But it's what you got to do to get to the final. I'll tell you what, once I finish this section, I'll start to do some of the silver. That way you can at least see me do some highlights. Yeah, I like the stealth suit well enough, but the stealth shield, I can't look at it. I understand why it's that way, but I just, Captain America, like Cap Shield without the red, I can't abide. I'm gonna paint it. I'm gonna make it look decent, but I remember watching it for the first time. I was like, oh, I can't look. All right, I want to get this line a little sharper. So I'm gonna use my flat. I'm gonna come in kind of at an angle. Get that edge just right. Yeah, okay. Oops. All right, and then I'm gonna do a little wash because I want to get that phthalo blue in there. Yeah, it's funny, like Payne's Gray on its own, it seems, if I just put it by itself, it seems like it leans toward phthalo a little bit. But then as soon as I put real phthalo over top of it, then it immediately looks really purple. And that's kind of why I like it, because it can go either way. So it's a good thing to start with. Now, normally I don't do an underpainting with it, but because this is, I know it's going to be navy, it just makes sense. It's like when I do his face, for instance, I'll probably use sepia or burnt umber. And, the effect that I want to go for, I think, is a more transparent, uniform. And then when I get to the face, that's, obviously where I want you to look. So I'll have a lot more opaque passes up there, really bold brush strokes, that kind of thing. I mean, most of my favorite paintings are like that. Everything's drawn well, everything is fully thought out. But when it comes to the actual strokes and paint handling, a lot more time is spent in the area of focus than the rest of it. It's a trick, but man, it works. Okay. Darken out a little bit. That's the way it always is when you're first starting out. You think this section's done, and then you realize you missed something. Actually, that's not just the beginning, that's throughout the whole process. Oh well. Alright, sit. Been at this 45 minutes. That's actually not bad progress. At least for me. Other people may be faster. Now, what I want to do is these little guys, the white stripes. I guess they're more like silver, so they've got a little bit of highlight to them, which contrasts nicely with blue. But before I get into painting that, I just want to make sure I have all the lines in there. So that's going to mean more Payne's gray. You know, and what I'm painting is actually the shadow of the cloth, not even getting to the silver bars yet. But I just want to make sure that it's very, very well defined. And then when I get to do the panel lines on the silver bars, I probably don't want to use Payne's gray. I probably want to use something lighter, or maybe I'll use Payne's gray mixed with a little bit of actual gray. Because Payne's gray is, I don't know why it's called that, but it is not very gray, it's very blue. Let's see, I think I'll paint for another 20 minutes. In case you guys are like, when is he gonna stop? Make it stop. All right, enough of that. Let's get to the silver bars. I'm gonna use some gray. I'm going to mix in a tiny bit of Payne's gray. So Holbein gouache, they have, I realized in my last video I misspoke. I said that they had 4 grays. I think they only have 3 in gouache, but they have 4 in acrylic gouache. I don't know the reason for the difference, but this is how it is. So this is gray number 3, which is the darkest. Gray number 3 is the darkest. Okay, put a little bit of white in there. Yeah, you gotta be careful with white. It makes everything very chalky. So the way I usually think about it is I try to avoid white until I'm in the opaque stage, and I am always, very aware of the fact that white is a color and it's going to make everything blue, and so the way to counteract that is actually to add orange. And so I usually have orange on my palette. Usually I'll have yellow ochre and then a bright orange. What you actually need, the precise hue is right in between, so it's like a yellow orange, and that is what you need to counteract the bluish effect of white. But since I'm still kind of in the transparent stage, I don't have to worry about that yet. But once I get into the face or any opaque passes, it's kind of all that I think about. Okay. So that's too dark, so I'm going to have to lighten it up with some white, but it's also probably not blue enough. So I'm going to add some of the navy blue, which is just a really strong phthalo. By the way, I'm assuming that I pronounce all these words correctly. Phthalocyanine, cyanine, cyanine, I have no idea. But I know what it does, and that it's a very, very strong pigment. So I've made it lighter and bluer. And I may have gone too far, but I can always course correct later on. Actually, I know this is too blue, but whatever. And still too dark. Now, if you look at this reference, it is pretty dark. I want to go lighter than that because I want more of a contrast between the silver bars and the blue. So I'm going to go even lighter. And I think what I'm going to do is actually do it transparently. Because then I have a little bit more control over how dark I want to go without having to go back and mix. That's why working transparently. Transparently is so nice. You can attack things in stages, and then once you see everything in context, then you can go back and adjust things. Whereas with opaque passes, you got to know what you're doing. You know, as soon as you put brush to paper. So I want it to be light enough to pop away from the blue in a stronger manner than it does here, but I want it to be dark enough that a white highlight on the edge will pop. So kind of just gotta straddle that line. Here there's an actual highlight as it dips into the shoulder, so I want to leave that there. You know, just let the white of the paper through. You know, that's already pretty effective right there. And so what I'll do later is I'll actually go back into that white section and warm it up a little bit, and that'll make it, you know, look more silver as opposed to just gray. It'll look like there's light reflecting off of it. A specular highlight is the technical term. You know, when light goes and bounces off something as if it's a mirror, which is, it's different than the way that light normally bounces off of things. You know, it's, if you're doing a study of a sphere, it's the one pinprick of white light, and it's often counterintuitive if you haven't done it before, because it's in a place that's different than the lightest part of the ball. It's usually more towards the, well, it's, you know, it's if you treat the surface like a mirror, it bounces at the part where the light physically hits the surface and then shoots towards your eye. Difficult to explain, but if I showed you in ZBrush or some 3D program, it'd be easy to see. And, you know, I've mentioned it before, but I highly recommend learning some kind of rudimentary 3D program, because it just, even if you're just a painter, it will help the way that you think. It'll help the way you draw, and then it'll also help with the way that you render light and just think about light in general. Sorry, the fact that I hadn't painted this is starting to bother me, so I wanted to get that color in there because I was so close to being done. There, that feels better. And then I'll go put in a little bit of phthalo, what they call navy. And this is another synthetic natural blend, specifically for watercolor and transparent applications. Those brushes, they tend to be a little flimsier, whereas the ones that are for opaque passes are very, very stiff. But you can mix and match, because sometimes there might be a different effect that you're going for. Sometimes if it's too thick or too stiff, it can actually scrape paint away. And sometimes that's what you want, and other times it's not. So it's just good to play around. Yeah, like when I first started painting, I was working in oil, which well, it's a fine medium, but not for comics. But I was painting everything with like hog bristle, because I thought that's like what you were supposed to use, and well, you don't have to. There's lots of other stuff you can use, and it's funny like that. People talk about brushes, and ask what brush is that. And it does matter. Like my style kind of changed when I changed the brushes I was using. Obviously, my draftsmanship did not change very much. It did not improve markedly, except through just practice. But the style, like people don't like to talk about style, but I don't mind, because eventually you have to come up with some way to differentiate yourself. The tough part is you'll never know until you just start doing it. Like if you're just starting out, there's just no way you can predict where you're going to end up. And that's part of the fun of it. But, I remember how frustrating that was when I was beginning, because I was very worried that I didn't want to be an Alex Ross clone, but at the same time, it was a huge, huge influence on me. And my manner of working, I owed a lot to just what I had read about his technique. But, it's one way. My way of combating that was to work in oils, which is not what he used. And it forced me to think differently, so that when I eventually did settle back to gouache, which is what he primarily uses, my brain was already different enough that I wasn't worried about aping his style. And my style changes, like from piece to piece. And I like that. Like it's not always a good thing, like career-wise, but once you're fairly established and have somewhat of a following, you can kind of relax a little bit when it comes to style. I say that, and all of a sudden tomorrow everyone's gonna stop hiring me. No, I'm not too worried, but no more worried than usual. So here, this little section it's the cast shadow from the shoulder strap hitting the silver bars. I just want to make sure that I get that, because it's just kind of a nice moment. It's not too apparent in the reference, but it's one of those things that you can accentuate. All right, enough of that. Let's get some warmth in there. I'm going to do the shoulder strap, and I'm going to again kind of exaggerate the level of warmth that's on there. Make sure that's focusing. Okay. Apologies if it's going in and out of focus. I like having the option to have the autofocus on, so that if I do want to show something else, I can. Now, I think I'm going to keep... Oh, I just heard my son's pacifier hit the floor. Let me check on him. Still sleeping. He's right above me. So what was I saying? I'm still going to keep Payne's Gray as my shadow color. And that's usually a good idea in general, because if you use the same shadow color throughout, it tends to unify a picture. Because the way that light works is if it's a shadow, it's the absence of light, and if there is nothing coming at you to give you information, then that information is not going to change. So it being the absence of light, it's not going to change that much unless there is another form of light interacting with it. So for instance, if you had something behind him that was glowing, for instance an explosion, you're going to let the light from that explosion bleed into the shadows and make it a little bit more orange. But by itself, it's just going to stay that deep dark Payne's Gray, and it won't really be affected by anything else. So getting back to what we're painting, I'm going to paint the shoulder strap, which is going to be warm, but the shadows are still going to be cool, and just as cool as everything else, his blue uniform, if that makes any sense. I've only had half my drink, so gotta catch up. Then I'll really start talking. This is a poor man's old-fashioned. Good stuff. Yeah, even without the quarantine, this is usually how I spend my Friday nights. Probably should go out more, but yeah, it's fine. The main thing that has changed with the quarantine is just there are other people here with me. Usually it's just me. But I digress. All right, stay focused, Paula. This is the seam line. There's that. This is going to be metal, I believe. Actually, let me check my photo reference in Photoshop. Yeah. So this is a metal buckle of some sort. So it's really, really dark there. I'm not going to go that dark. I'm going to leave a little bit of light, just because I think it'll look better. Okay, that's good. That's super dark. I'm a little confused. Oh, that's the buckle. That's why it's usually good to have more than one reference. So this part I probably went too dark, but it's okay. It's gouache. I can go opaque after. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to wash everything with a little bit of blue so that the warmth that I'm going to put over it will have something to fight against, because that'll just make the texture so much richer, especially with something organic like leather. There's just a lot of modulation in, saturation and hue and everything that it's much easier to achieve transparently. Because when you're doing things transparently by its very nature, you're going to have layers and layers and layers, and they add up to something that, you know, is very tough to achieve with opaque paint. So just kind of, it's almost dry brushing. Not quite, but almost. Just putting some texture in there, but keeping it light. And now I'll go back over it with probably burnt umber. So, burnt umber gouache. I don't need very much, just a touch. Usually when I have my palette, like I have a very specific way of setting up my paints. But that's only if I'm in the opaque stage. If I'm doing transparent painting, like it's wherever my hand lands, honestly. It's only when I get to an opaque painting where I really need to buckle down and create a rainbow, basically, and a perfect gradation from one to the other. But, you know, when I'm painting transparently, it just doesn't matter. Wherever there's room, that's where it goes. I'm gonna see if I can get you guys in real close. Just for this one pass. Oop. Sorry about that. I accidentally hit the power button. Okay, so I'm gonna grab a little bit of the burnt umber. I just that the warmth and the cool kind of fight each other, and just makes the leather look nice. Now, again, I'm gonna end up going a lot darker than this, but I want to find a texture and a pattern that I like, and then once that's achieved, then I'm gonna go back and play with the values. Now, if I were doing a face, that'd be much different. I would make sure I lock the values in first. But since this is a shoulder strap, I just want it to look kind of nice. Yeah, because if I look over here, I just want it to be a bit more distinctive. All right, I think that's going to be good for now. I just want to let it sit. Put this back in my tripod. Maybe move this a little bit closer. All right, how much time we got left? Oh wow, it's already midnight. Let's paint one more thing and then call it quits. And have one more sip. Any last questions? Let me know and I'll answer them just before I sign off. But we're basically done. I think I'm just going to complete that area. Yeah, close enough. Ooh, I just felt that bourbon. I think this is ending at just the right time. Now you guys get to see if I can still paint. It's nice to be able to drink on the job. No, I don't do this all the time. I usually try and limit it to Friday nights. Although this week, we did get a pretty big order of spirits. In this, the 5th week of quarantine. We're surviving. Basically, thanks to all the delivery people. FedEx and USPS, UPS. Whole Foods, Amazon. Basically keeping us alive right now. So remember to tip, folks. If you can. And bring out the noodler. Anytime I have to get on any of that stuff. All those little details. You know, do this part first, and then once you got that stuff locked in, then you can go with the big brush and just kind of blast it all away. Because I don't actually want all that detail to show. I just, at the same time, I don't want to lose it, just in case I end up wanting it. I think there's one more seam here. I don't think it continues, just dark shadow there. And then I'll get this one. Once I do this section, I'll check all the comments again, if there are any. I don't know if you guys have been asking anything, but I'll check, and then we'll call it a night. I will finish my bourbon, and then I will go to bed, and we will start the weekend. The weekend's actually my time to work. My wife works during the week and basically supports this whole endeavor. And then I get the weekends to basically finish up all the commissions that I had promised people over the last decade. This one in particular is actually not that old. This is from, I want to say 2018. A local convention that I had done. I just never got around to doing this. So, apologies if you guys, a lot of people have been asking, am I taking commissions? No, not yet. I just have a huge backlog. It's actually not a huge backlog. If I were faster, I could get it done in a couple months. But it's just the way that my life pans out. I will get a good offer or a cool project, and I'll say, oh, I want to do that, and then 1 week turns into a month, and all of a sudden you're 10 years out. and the promises that you made 10 years ago, you still want to honor, and well, we'll see. Hopefully this will be the excuse I finally need to get to all of them, and then maybe I can start taking on commissions again. I actually haven't done a convention in a while. Basically not since my son was born last year. Actually a little bit before then. Okay, I think that'll have to do for now. Let me see if there were any questions or comments, and then I'll say goodbye. Hello. Thank you. Is this Gouache? Yes, this is Gouache. Would you ever make a color theory or rendering tutorial on here? I've talked about it. I don't know. I have a lot of raw footage that I need to turn into a tutorial. I just don't know if I'll ever get around to it. I did finally hire somebody to make some videos, and he's done a couple so far. But then actually we got sidelined by the whole pandemic thing. Thank you, Steve Mann. Why did you switch from the Stay Wet palette? Well, this is kind of like my own version of the Stay Wet palette. It's basically this, technique. It just is a different way of putting it together. I like the parchment paper because it was just easier to prepare, and it also doesn't, the Stay Wet palette paper, it would not hold up after a week. It would just kind of start to fray. And parchment paper is really good. Like, it's super thin, but man, it's tough stuff. All right, Rohan from India. Hello. Thanks for watching. My mom tackles me in the morning too. That's funny. How do you choose colors when you have to create from the beginning? I mean, you have the reference, but the same reference doesn't offer the color palette you want to paint. I almost always start with sepia or burnt umber if it's warm, and Payne's gray if it's dark. After that, I'll just do a color study and just see what works. Just for the sake of curiosity, can a lightsaber cut through Captain America's shield? I would imagine so, but I don't know. Ask Disney. Can you paint Loki? I was supposed to in the Avengers. Like, I put him in the sketch, and it just ended up not making it. I wanted Loki in there, I wanted Nick Fury, and I wanted Vision, and it was already, there were too many. Oh, Mayank. I'm sorry if I'm botching your name. He's the one that this is for. So thank you for your patience. Red round brush, which series and size? It is silver brush, golden natural, size 10. It seems small for 10. Oh, so important point here. If it says designer, which you can see right there, the designer series or designation, I don't know what to call it, they're smaller. So a number 10 designer is going to be much smaller than a regular round. See if I have any. I don't think I have any others because I use almost all designers. I think it's just a brush making thing. I don't know. Almost through the chats. Good morning from Austria. Wow. Hello. Can you share why gouache over watercolor or acrylic? I like gouache because you can go transparent or opaque. And why over acrylic? Because it doesn't turn into plastic. You know, acrylic is good for some things. It's great for when you want something to be waterproof, but I don't like the feel of it. And when I do use it, I don't like painting on gesso. I like having like actual paper that the paint can seep into, if that makes any sense. Can you share some words of motivation? I find myself not being content with anything I've been drawing. I want to try watercolor, but I freeze up and fear messing up. Yeah, so do what's easy. Like, the way I usually try and explain is you should do little sketches, you know, quick stuff that you're good at, you know, like they say to challenge yourself. And what I say is the important thing is that you're drawing, and you'll know that you're not, or you'll know that it's time to move on when you start to get bored. So do things that are easy but make you happy, and just keep doing it until you find yourself bored, and then try and challenge yourself a little bit harder. But the important thing is just to keep drawing. You know that you're what you're feeling is common to all artists. You know, even professionals who have been at this for years, including myself. How long did that sketch take you beforehand? To be completely honest, I don't remember. I think 30, 45 minutes, and that's because I was tracing a lot of it. So take that for what you want. Yeah, for a lot of these like portraits and stuff, it's just way faster for me to do it this way. But the thing is, like, there's a tracing. There's the tracing part of it, and then there's the drawing part of it. So I'll get like my major landmarks, and then I'll take the reference, I'll turn off that layer in Photoshop, and then I'll look to the side, and I'll have that reference to the side. And usually they look very different. So once I have my major landmarks done, then I actually go back in and I'm drawing, like, you know, I'm trying to make it look like that does. And it's just so funny because I was just tracing it a minute ago, and yet the final product does not look like what I intended. So what you're seeing here, it's, you know, I went in and I drew a line for the eye, I drew a line for the mouth, the nostrils, the ears, like that kind of stuff. And then it looks like crap. So then you have to take another 15 minutes and really just figure out why there's a difference. So you know, they usually say not to do it, but it's worth a shot just to see how you fail. It's a really important exercise to see why it doesn't work when you trace things. You know, you can get everything perfect, you can get all the proportions right, but something's still missing. And the only way you're going to get over that hurdle is just to draw every day, and you know, just keep doing it. All right, guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I know I did. Everybody stay safe, stay healthy, and hopefully I'll come back for another session this weekend. Thanks a lot. Bye.